Spiritual self-identity. Defining who we are according to a spiritual nature rather than a physical nature. Who you are matters. You can't claim to be God's person but imitate the world. What you are matters. The job you do, you may seem to think is insignificant, but you really have a significance either as a shepherd or a school teacher or a ball player or whatever. And then the importance of being and not just doing. Well, how do you get to that point? If you recognize that I've been doing superficial Christianity, I haven't been doing Christianity at all, how do you become what God wants you to become? Romans chapter 12, verse 21. You seen those before and after pictures? And this is the after picture. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And there you have it. That's how you transform. That's how you renew. You don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. When I was 40, or the year I turned 40, I learned to snowboard. I don't know if you've ever thought about a 40-year-old learning to snowboard. I made the cover of Old Dog's New Tricks magazine, all right? Take snowboard lessons from an 18-year-old in Colorado who grew up in the snow. I've seen snow deep enough to play in twice in my life, and I'm 50 in Alabama. So I go out here and, and basically this kid will get on a snowboard and go do something down the hill, come back and go, dude, do that. No, you can't do that. I'm 40. My legs don't work that way. I'm smart enough to have a sense of self-preservation. There's something in me that won't allow me to do that on a half pipe. It's called my brain, and I'm not going to do it. So when you read this verse in Romans and it says, don't be overcome by evil, overcome evil with good, it's kind of like having an 18-year-old look at you and go, dude, do that. How do I, do that? We're going to walk backwards through Romans 12 and look at some of the things that happen to get us to this point. And I guess I can't number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because we're going backwards. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil. Verse 18, if it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men. The first thing about not being overcome by evil is understanding that it's not up to you to balance the books. Somebody harms you, somebody offends you, somebody sins against you, you don't have to fix that. Forgiving other people is the only way to have control over your life. If you hurt my feelings and I say I'm never going to be happy till you're hurt as bad as I'm hurt, I just gave you control of my life. If you offend me and I'm never going to be happy till you are offended as bad as I am, you've got control of my life. But when I decide I'm going to do what I'm going to do because it's what you need, not what you deserve, I've solved that problem. The other part of this is, if it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Sometimes we make a mistake as young Christians to try to be responsible for things we can't control. If I'm good enough, smart enough, fast enough, athletic enough, cute enough, thin enough, whatever enough, they will do such and such. Remember, the golden rule was never designed to change other people's behavior. The golden rule was designed to change our behavior. And then I behave the way I behave, and it has nothing to do with the way you behave. So sometimes I'm going to live peaceably with you as much as I can, and you're still going to be a jerk. That's not mine to clean up. If I could make you not like me, I could make you like me. You see how easy that is? My daughter used to say, Dad, you're making me mad. No, baby, I'm not. You're choosing to. Dad, you're making me mad. No, baby, I'm not. Dad, you're making. Honey, if I could control your emotions, you'd like me and buy me presents. And since I'm not unwrapping anything, apparently I'm not driving this bus. You decide whether you're going to like me or not. Well, sometimes as young people, we get this false notion in Christianity that if I'm the right kind of person, you'll be the right kind of person. And if you're not the right kind of person, by default, I'm failing. That's not what the Bible teaches. Jesus was perfect, and they hated him and murdered him. Now, while they murdered him, he said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. But it's never about that my behavior affects your behavior. So get off this idea that if you can be cool enough, smart enough, nice enough, sweet enough, your parents will be this, or your brother won't be that, or a member at your church, or somebody at your school. It has nothing to do with changing other people's behavior. Your behavior may influence their behavior. But if I think that I'm the reason, and young people are funny that way. Young people think that my parents got divorced, and if I had made better grades, they wouldn't. No. If you could do anything to make them divorce, you could make them stay together. Since they're not staying together, you didn't make them divorce. The same is true of suicide. I got a call the other day. A kid killed himself at one of the local high schools. The principal asked me to come in and talk to him. And there's 4 or 5 guys had picked on him. And it was almost like a lynch mob. These guys bullied him into killing himself. I said, how many of you guys were friends with this dude? You know, the assembly raised their hands. I said, well, if 4 people could kill him, how come 100 people can't keep him alive? It's not a choice you made. It's not a choice they made. It's a choice he made. And until you learn that there are some things in life I'm not responsible for, and you're only responsible for those things that you can control. That's your relationship with God. That's your spiritual self-identity. And that's what you're going to do regardless of what anybody else does. Because when we decide what we are, we decide what we do. And so as much as possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with other people. And people who say, if you don't do this, you're not going to be my friend, those people are manipulators. And you may have to say, this little skit where it says, we're not going to accept you. She said, well, me and Jesus will miss you. Okay? That's not exactly how they say it, but that's the Alabama version of it. All right? You know? And so you've got to understand that there's a part of your behavior that you control, but you don't control anybody else's behavior. So as much as possible, as much as it depends on you, you live at peace with all people. Moving on up. Verse 9. Let love be without hypocrisy. I don't love you because I'm expecting to get anything out of it. I love you just simply because I love you. There's no hidden agenda there. Now, I'm afraid that sometimes we have hidden agendas. Closer to deer season, if you've got property, we'll come clean your fence lines. I don't know why we can't clean your fence lines in the spring, but it's always in the fall we want to clean those fence lines. Guys are notorious. When I was a freshman at Harding University, I'd go over there to the girls' dorm and help them move in. Okay? If you're a cute little blonde from Texas and you're carrying a shoebox full of feathers, I'd carry it for you. If I thought you looked like death eating a biscuit, I wouldn't. You're trying to push a safe up the stairs. You know, that was love with hypocrisy. Okay? I had a hidden agenda. Do you have a dog at your house? We have a dog at our house named Max. Maximus Decimus Meridius. The 6-pound Yorkie. What, I don't like a Yorkie guy? Look, Max showed up at my dad's house. He's a runaway. He just showed up at my dad's. My dad's outside sweeping the porch and this fuzzball shows up. Well, Dad recognizes you have to clean their eyes and pluck their ears, and they're high-maintenance little dogs, so he gives them to Lonnie Beth. Well, Lonnie Beth goes to college, so I've got a Yorkie. Okay, now, I had a fence in my backyard that contained an 82-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback named Mulder for 15 years. And Max can get out of it. I don't know. You know, I'm sitting at the office. Bring, hello, Lonnie Jones. Hey, your dog's loose. Okay, fine, I'm coming home. Bring, hey, Mr. Jones, I think your dog's loose. I'm coming home. Bring, Mr. Jones, I think I saw your dog. Look, it's a 6-pound Yorkie. Put a bucket over him. He's not the Kraken, all right? I mean, I'm coming to the house. Max doesn't know what I do for a living. Max doesn't know what my degree is in. Max doesn't know how much money I make. Max doesn't really know my name. Because when I tell him I'm Lonnie, a dog hears, okay? Now, he understands the word cheese. He sell his soul for a piece of cheese. I go, Max, if you'll do this, I'll give you a piece of cheese. What he hears is, cheese. And he's in. Max doesn't care anything about me except Max loves me. Period. If I leave him in the house, walk outside to go to the mailbox and come back in, he acts like I've been to the moon. He's back. And that's it. He loves me without hypocrisy. He loves me because I'm in the house. And you got to love people not because they can do anything for you or because you want something from them. You love them because they need to be loved, period. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. Folks, I'm afraid we have lost the idea of hating evil. We've glorified evil. We've made evil cool. We've made evil fashionable. Remember the animated thing that Walt Disney did with Robin Hood as the fox? Robin Hood and Little John sitting there, and Little John says, "Hey, Rob, are we good guys or bad guys?" I think for a long time we fudged the lines between good guys. You know, when I was growing up, our hero was the Lone Ranger. He was not a tormented soul. He rode a white horse, had a white hat, had silver bullets, and never told a lie. And then we run into Clint Eastwood and Arnold. And you're not sure whose side these guys are really on. You just hope they're on your side. When the Jews got the law from God that said, this is unclean, a Jew didn't sit around looking at some Gentile eating pork and go, man, I wish I could have some of that. A Jew looked at that and went, that's roadkill, you know. And you get the Jews and the Gentiles in the same church at Corinth, and potluck day was a mess, okay? Wait till John the Baptist shows up at your potluck dinner. Locust and wild honey, or wild locust and honey. I don't know how it goes. I don't know where the wild fits in, but you know. But the Jews didn't go, man, I wish I could have some of that. God said it was nasty, and they would throw up on it. I can't believe you put that in your mouth. And somewhere down the line, God said this was unclean to us, and we go, man, I wish I could have some of that. Abhor what is evil. I hear the debate about social drinking. The Bible doesn't condemn drinking, it condemns drunkenness. I got a buddy named Ben Hayes. Ben's off the chain. He's an interesting guy. Ben bow fishes with us. It's a thing we do in the South. You float around on a boat and you shoot fish with a bow and arrow. It's really cool. Somebody said, Lonnie, do you hunt or do you fish? I said, I hunt fish. How's that? You know. Well, Ben decided that the only thing more exciting than shooting a fish with a bow would be catching live animals. So they started going into these areas where the water's low and wading around and just, you know, kind of swamp people things. And then he decided that if you really want to get some excitement going, instead of just catching the animals, you catch poisonous snakes. We have a thing down there called a cottonmouth water moccasin. And every water moccasin is not lethally venomous. And they're not poisonous, they're venomous. Poison you ingest, venom is injected. I had lunch with an exterminator and got straightened out on that real fast, okay? So you wander around and you jump off the boat and you get your water moccasin, and most people don't get bit. And everybody that gets bit doesn't die. And occasionally, you take the teens with you, and occasionally a teen will get bit, and that upsets the parents. Now, as I tell this story, you are looking at me like I have lost my mind. You said, Lonnie, you're as stupid as a run-over dog if you hang around with people like that. Now, I say that about water moccasins and you get it. I say it about alcohol and you don't. Sure, not everybody that drinks becomes an alcoholic, not everybody that drinks ruins their family, not everybody that drinks gets killed in a car wreck. But if you don't put your hands on it at all, none of this stuff will happen. You get it about the water moccasin, and Ben doesn't really check for water moccasins. Remember what Solomon said about liquor? It stings like an asp, bites like an adder. I think that's where Ben got his sermon illustration. Abhor what is evil. When's the last time you heard somebody stand up and say, I'd like to thank alcohol for making me a better dad? I'd like to thank alcohol for making me a better athlete. I'd like to thank... They just don't give that speech. Interesting thing about alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. If you take it and it does what it's supposed to do, you're supposed to go to sleep. If you take it and you think you can dance, you've had an allergic reaction to it. If you take it and you think you're Iron Man, you've had an allergic reaction to it. The interesting thing about the dynamic of alcohol is it raises your confidence level and lowers your performance level, directly proportionate. Yeah, so here's a guy who thinks he's 6 foot tall and bulletproof, and he's 4'11" and drunker than Cooter Brown, okay? And why can't we just label it for what it is? It's poison to the soul and it's poison to the body. But we glorify it. Abhor what's evil. It's not an alternative lifestyle, it's homosexuality. It ruins people's lives. There's 3 manifestations of homosexuality. People who've been abused, prematurely sexualized, and they get wired and don't realize that they were wired that way because of something somebody did to them. It's either because they are seeking male approval and they substitute male affection for male approval, or they're a sex addict and they've done what Romans 1 describes as they've had sex in all these exotic ways, and that's just the next step on the exotic chain. It ruins your life. It's not an alternative lifestyle, it's homosexuality. It's not an affair. It's adultery. It's not a little white lie. It's just a lie. And all liars will have their part in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone. Abhor what is evil. If it will kill my soul or kill the souls of my friends, I don't have anything to do with it. And when I label evil as evil, it's very good then you can overcome evil with good, because you've got a pretty clear category of what is evil and what is good. But so many times we fudge that line, and that's not what we're supposed to do. Moving on up into the chapter. Verse 4, for as we have many members in one body, but all members do not have the same function, so we, being many, are one body in Christ and individually members of one another. Having then gifts differing according to the grace God has given us, let's use them. If prophecy, let's prophesy force to our faith. If ministry, let us use it in ministering. And he who teaches in teaching, and exhortation, and he who gives with liberality, and he who leads with diligence, and he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. What he's saying here is that when you understand who you are, when you understand what your shepherding role is, when you understand that the job you have was given to you so you could function as part of the body. And as part of this spiritual self-identity is not just the idea that I'm a spiritual person, but I'm a spiritual person that belongs to a spiritual body. I talk about the idea of corporate individuality. You know what a corporate group is, right? And you know what an individual is, right? Well, corporate individuality is that mindset that says, I am a member of the body, but member individually. So I'm a single part of a big whole. It's kind of like an oxymoron when you talk about corporate individuality. You guys know what an oxymoron is? Like jumbo shrimp, Kentucky football. I mean, stuff like that. Things that don't hate. I just didn't know what was safe to use up here, okay? All right. But when you talk about corporate individuality, it's the idea that I don't just see myself as me. I've got a spiritual self-identity that connects me to Christ. Well, if I'm connected to Christ and you're connected to Christ, who am I connected to? Oh, wow. I'm connected to you. So when I begin to see you not through the filter of where you go to school or what you like to drive or who your favorite team is, but I simply see you as connected to Christ. And by the way, when the church is described in the Bible, it's never described as an organization. It's always described as an organism. And as part of an organism, I've got relationships with you. I got married when I was 21. My wife was 18. My parents didn't have girls. Jackie comes to our house as an 18-year-old, and my parents now have a daughter. And so basically, they just treated her like this 18-year-old daughter that had been adopted. And we, lived our lives with Jackie going on vacations with us and hanging out with us and spending Christmas with us. And we were married, and that's just the way it was. My brother's older than me by 18 months. So I was 21. So that makes him about 23. When we got married, he did the wedding ceremony for us. He didn't get married till he was 39. And his wife is different than my wife. She doesn't have the same kind of outdoor personality that Jackie does. Jackie played softball. Jackie plays volleyball. Jackie's been climbing. Jackie likes to ride horses in the Rockies. Jackie likes to snowboard. She wanted a baseball bat for her 17th birthday. She wanted new knee pads and sliding pants for her 21st birthday. On her 39th birthday, she wanted her own snowboard. She's a pretty outdoorsy little person. Gerald's wife, Missy, doesn't sweat. Doesn't like to be outside. Doesn't have my sense of humor. They got married at this church, had this big air vent up on the stage. And when they said, "Are there rings present?" I pulled out a penny and dropped it through that air vent. Ding, ding, boom, ding, ding. What? Oh, yes, I did. Missy did not laugh. I mean, didn't even crack a smile. I almost got a double hipper and a foot tapper. It's one of just doesn't have my sense of humor. When they started having children, And I love them to death, but they named their little girl, they were in that generation where you name your children like after antique furniture or something. You know, they're trying to come up with these interesting, I said you would need to name your little girl Inya, and her middle name needs to be Anna, so she'd be Inya Anna Jones. Does that rock or what? I mean, listen, no, the new Miss Jones didn't like that neither, all right? Now, the cool thing about that, and let me go on record, and Missy knows this, I love her. She's unique in her own way. When we go to their house, she's a fabulous hostess, does some real interesting things, has always doted over Lonnie Beth, kind of gave Lonnie Beth the girly girl gifts, you know, when it came. But you know what? It really doesn't matter how I feel about Missy. You know why? She's my brother's wife. When he put that ring on her finger and she took his last name, she got a status in my life. And she calls me and needs me, I'm showing up. And I don't want to be old macho bad or anything like that, but I'll die for her and I'll kill for her. It has nothing to do with her. She's connected to my brother. And since she's connected to my brother, she's connected to me. End of line. Period. You're connected to Jesus. That's all I need to know, end of line. You're connected to Jesus. I don't need to know anything else. We're connected. And if I understand my relationship with you, not just a spiritual self-identity, but a corporate individuality as a self-identity, then it changes the dynamics. It transforms how I treat people. It renews how I deal with people. So we've got and I've skipped a lot of stuff, but we don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good as much as is possible. Live at peace with all men. Love without hypocrisy. Abhor what's evil. Cling to what's good. Understand your role in the body. Well, how do you do that? Verse 2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. See, you can't conform to the world. You can't be poured in their molds. You can't be stamped in their image. That's what that Greek word literally means, is to have that seal stamped in the wax and you come away looking like it. You can't be conformed. Moses couldn't be a faithful servant of God and look like an Egyptian. Now, how do you not conform? You transform. How do you transform? By the renewing of your mind. That's actually the best Greek translation for the word repentance there is. To renew the mind. Because when you change the way you think, you change the way you live. When you change the way you view things, you change the way you operate. When you begin to view sin as sin, you renew your mind. God has never told you you couldn't do something that wasn't already bad for you anyway. Everything God has said you shouldn't do is bad for you. If you trust God, renew your mind to do what He says, then it's not an issue about sin and temptation. See, it's about renewing your mind. And renewing your mind boils down to changing what you want. James chapter 1, verse 13. Don't anybody say when you're tempted, I'm tempted by God. God can't be tempted and doesn't tempt anybody with evil. But each one of us is drawn away when by our own, Old King James says lust. New King James says desires. We are drawn away and enticed. The word drawn away there is a Greek word for putting bait in a trap. The word enticed is a Greek word for putting a lure on the end of a line. See, we're tempted by what we want. All sin is based in selfishness. That's why all sin is the same. That's why a guy stealing a candy bar from Walmart and a guy who's out here axe murdering children is the same in God's eyes, because it's all based in selfishness. Your sin and my sin individually doesn't really matter. My sin is the individual manifestation of selfishness in my life. Now, where does my sin come from? Well, James says I'm tempted when the things that I want are like bait in a trap or a lure on the end of the line, and I get that. We study climbing accidents. They write a report every month in Rock and Ice magazine about people that get killed rock climbing. Okay? Mr. Gravity never sleeps. So when you get up there in the vertical environment, you got to know what's going on. There's two factors that always involve a death of a rock climber. Internal hazards and external hazards. Something going on inside the climber, something going on outside the climber. Internal hazards, external hazards, and when those two things intersect, somebody dies. Same thing happens in an airplane. Internal hazards, external hazards, that's what's caused people to get killed in airplanes. Okay? What does James say about spiritual death? Internal hazards, the things that we want, and then the opportunity to do those things, we're drawn away and enticed. External hazards, when sin is full grown, it brings forth death. Internal hazards, external hazards, that's how you get killed spiritually. Well, how do you avoid that? You transform, you don't conform, and you transform by the renewing of your mind. When you change your mind about some of these things, that the most important thing in school is not to be liked, it's to be approved by God. When you change your mind that the most important thing you can be is God's person. Not I'm a football player, not I'm a basketball player, not I'm an A student, but I'm God's student. I make A's or B's or C's. I'm God's student, I play football. I'm God's student, I march in the band. I'm God's student. When your definition of yourself is I want to be pleasing to God, then you have transformed your mind in doing things. Now, what's the biggest factor to transform your mind? Romans chapter 12, verse 1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Paul's going to make an argument. And he's going to make an argument for you and I to change who we are. And in order to convince us to change who we are, he's going to make an argument. Now understand, Paul could make this argument. Let me tell you guys about this little thing called the flood. See, God got so tired of evil that he sent enough water on the earth, the water from above and the cavitation pressure from below. I got a friend who draws maps of caves underground. He connected the two largest cave systems in Arkansas, drew the map of them. He does not believe the big cave systems were cut by water draining back in the earth. He believes that all the original cave systems were cut by water exploding out. When the power and the wrath of God said, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And everything on the planet was covered by 23 feet of water. Paul could have said, now, you hear me, sinners? You fool around with this. This is what God can do with water. Well, let me tell you about a little place called Sodom and Gomorrah, where God literally nuked it. So much heat that the people were vaporized and turned to their mineral states. Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt, vaporized. But Paul doesn't say, let me tell you what God can do to you. He says, I beg you based on the mercies of God. Not what God can do to you, but what God has done for you. And if I ever recognize what God has done for me, it really changes the way I think. It transforms me and it renews me. Because my response to Christianity is not based in what God can do to me. My response to Christianity is based on what God's done for me. And once I understand that, and I see that God loves me, God always has loved me, then I change. I see myself as valued and as valuable. I see myself as bought with a price. I see myself as owned and submissive. And something interesting takes place in my mind, a renewal of my thought process. The most elegant description of this is what Paul does with the church at Corinth. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14. For the love of Christ compels us. When I understand the love of Christ, it pulls me. It drags me. It makes me do something. When I was a student at Abhorring University, I had the job I was the janitor in the Bible building, having to pay for my schooling by being a janitor. I was the only guy strong enough to lift the buffer. A buffer is a 5-horsepower machine that you had to take down to the bottom where the Bible offices were, what we call the Holy of Holies, and you had to buff the white marble tile floor. Well, I'd be down there running the buffer, and you hold this buffer, and you just move it to one side, and it'll scoot over here, and just move it to this side and move it. I'm sitting there running the buffer. Beautiful fall day in Arkansas. People walking by, you hear balls dribbling, you see frisbees bouncing, you think, man, I wish I'd be out there. Those beautiful fall days, you're down here in the cave, just can barely see the windows. And I used to ride a skateboard. You stand on a skateboard and you want to go that way, you lean that way. You want to go that way, you lean that way. I thought, you lean that buffer, it goes that way. You lean the buffer, it goes that way. I bet a man could stand on a buffer. and have a good time. Did you know they designed buffers with a safety switch that you can't stand in front of them and turn them on? But you can bypass that with a coat hanger. So there I stand. Got in my good mood, got my form. I hit that switch. There's a thing called centripetal force. Start spinning that buffer. If you let go, it will throw you through the wall. If you hang on, it will continue to spin with you. At some point, you will run out of extension cord and it will unplug itself and you will not die. Okay? You ever sung the song, Wrapped Up, Tied Up, Tangled Up in Jesus? Well, I've sung it with a buffer, all right? What Paul says is, once you understand the love of Christ, it pulls you into a vortex. And you can't let go of it, and it can't let go of you. The love of Christ compels us. How does it compel us? How does it wrap us up? Because this is what we decide, that if one died for all, then all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again. When I understand the love of Christ in my life, not what God could do to me, but what God has done for me, I get wrapped up in his love. And I become his ambassador. In fact, he really says it beautifully right here. Verse 21, for he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. You really want to change how you see yourself? You change what God did for you. You understand that he took Jesus, he made him who knew no sin, and put him in the place of the sinner so the sinner could stand in the place of the righteous. And when I realize that's what he's done for me, then the love of Christ will compel me to change, to transform, to renew, to submit, to comply. That's the message of the gospel. That we were sinners and Christ came to die. And when Christ came to die, his death paid my price. And by faith, without faith it's impossible to please him. For he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Hebrews 11:6. When I believe in Jesus and I'm willing to transform, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by renewing your mind, willing to repent, confess him as the Ethiopian eunuch did, Acts 8:37. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Matthew 10:32 and 33. If you confess me before men, I'll confess you before my Father. If you deny me before men, I'll deny you before my Father. Believing, repenting, and confessing, we're baptized. We die to ourselves. We judge thus that if one died, then all died. And we no longer live for ourselves, but we live for him who died. We're buried, and we rise to walk again. That's transformation and renewal. But you can't be motivated to transform and renew until you understand what he's done for you. Years ago, a bunch of kids and I were at Pigeon Forge. We'd done a set of skits, hanging out with another group. We had some downtime and went down into Pigeon Forge, and they had this little place where they do a passion play. The old word for passion means to suffer. And it was about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And they had these, above this little village set up where they did this outdoor play, they had these 3 crosses. And the middle cross was on a hinge, had handles on it. Skinny kid in our youth group named Doug Weeks, we called him Weasel. Went down there and they got on that cross and they raised Weasel up in the air. And Weasel hollered, "Hey, Lonzo, man, come down here." So I started trotting toward them. And I probably got from here to the back wall of the building from them. And I said, "Guys, no, let's go." They all came with me. We got on the van. You drive 10 minutes on the van, everybody's asleep, except Weasel. He stuck that shaggy head between the seats. He's bobbing that head to music nobody else can hear. You know how teenagers are, right? He said, "Hey, Lonzo, man." He said, "How come you wouldn't get on that cross?" I said, "Well, think about it, Doug." I said, "You got 3 crosses. You got a cross on the right, a cross on the left, and a cross in the middle. The cross on the right, who did it belong to? A thief. Cross on the left, who did it belong to? It belonged to a thief. Cross in the middle, who did it belong to? Jesus, right? No. Cross in the middle was mine. Yours. You didn't have to get on it. He made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. He got on my cross. He didn't die for his sins. He died for mine. And because he took my place on my cross, I take his place in my school, in my home, in my neighborhood. Transformation and renewal. Spiritual self-identity is I'm a spiritual person and I'm the representation of Jesus to everybody I meet. And if you're not a Christian, and that's not how you manifest your Christianity, you need to give it some serious concern. You need to make some serious changes. If you're not a Christian, don't leave today without letting us baptize you. If you are a Christian and you've got something you need to clean up with your youth group, take it home, talk to them about it. If there's some way we can help you publicly, we'll sing a song. These two guys will stand up here, and if you need to respond, you come talk to them. If we can study with you, pray for you, baptize you, make sure you leave here today with a proper spiritual self-identity and a relationship with God. Transformation and renewal is open to you while we stand, while we sing.